All I wanna do is feel awesome. Baby, can you make me feel awesome? Up and down, side to side, and then back and forth. Up all night again, me and you, left and right, and then whoa, whoa. I'm in a new particular place again. Had a couple fucks, but I lost them. I'm sleepwalking in the dark again.
Okay, great. Hello and welcome to this new YouTube video, and this time I'm going to show you how to make that sexy chocolate bar you have seen in the intro of this video. So here we go. So if you're inside Blender, the first thing we would need to do is to create the bar itself. So the way I'm doing it is, let's delete everything here, and I'm going to add a cube and scale it a bit like this and that, and in this way. Okay, so this is a good basic to start. So what we can do now is in edit mode add some cuts here. So I press Ctrl and R, and then I use the mouse wheel, and you can see what happens here. So we have something like this here. Now I would like to select each second of these edges and move them along the z-axis in this way, an example. And yeah, if you would like to, you can add some variance by using also some other edges here and move them a bit into another direction. Just if you like, it's not really required. It might look a bit more beautiful. Okay, so let's do this here. Okay, not that much. Okay, so the next thing would be to add subdivision surface modifier on it. So it might be a bit too round now, so let's increase the viewport and render subdivisions. Okay, that looks nice. And in edit mode, add some more loop cuts to make the edges a little bit more sharp. Something like this here. Yes, I think I like it. And this way. And this way. Okay, so that is enough. I think it's okay for the beginning, and of course for explain how this thing will work. So the trick here is we cannot really mix different fluid simulations together in one simulation, but we can use the Alembic cache to export and import a finished simulation, and this is what I'm going to show you now. So we have our bar here, and what we are going to do now is we will cover it with some fluids. I would say the first thing that we should use to cover it is caramel. So let me shade this smooth. Okay, so let's enable this to become an obstacle. So this is very important, and we need an outflow where the caramel will come from. So I think I will use I'll take a cylinder, yeah, rotate it, scale it a bit like this, and this, yeah, okay. Make sure it is big enough to cover the bar. Okay, so and what we're going to do is we need a keyframe simulation animation where this cylinder will move from one side to the other side to cover all of this bar with caramel. Okay, I would say make sure you are at frame number 1, and then move that thing to one side. I would say here, and set a keyframe for location. So the next thing is we should think about how long it will take to move from there to there. So if it is too fast, it looks not really good, because we have high viscosity fluid here that will buckle and coil, and we need really slow motion. So I would think something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes, something like 7 seconds would work really great. And as I'm using a frame rate of 25 seconds, the way we will do it is we open the calculator and 25 frames per second, and that's 7 times, and we have 175 frames that we need from the left to the right side. So jump to 175, it's here, and move this to this side here. Make sure the bar will nearly completely covered this way, and set a new location keyframe. Okay, so this is a movement we have. It should be 7 seconds, and now we are going to set this as an inflow object. Okay, and of course we need a domain object, otherwise there's no place for simulations. So let's add one, make a cube, go to flip fluids and domain, and important is to scale this domain as small as possible, because the higher or the bigger the domain is, the longer a simulation or baking will take. And I think it's much better if it will not take that much time. So let's resize this thing a bit. Of course, we should make sure that everything is inside, so we will not miss anything here. In edit mode we can bring the bottom more up like this. Yes, okay, so these are the basics. We are not going to set a high resolution now, because we will start with some preview simulations, and when we are happy with what we can see, then we will increase the resolution. Okay, so what is also required is to open the word panel here to enable viscosity, and for caramel I think 5 will be great. Okay, before we go to bake, it's important to save the file, so let's choose a folder. I think tutorial will be a good one, and give it a number like, let's say 1, and it's caramel. Okay, and save this one, and then while the domain is selected, hit bake and see what will happen. Okay, I have 500 frames in my setup here, so I think it's not really required to simulate that many frames, so it's okay to abort this when we have enough. So while it is baking, we can take a look how it is looking like now. Okay, so let's wait until our cylinder emitted fluid till the other side of this bar. Okay, we are at frame 200, I think that will be enough now. If you like, you can wait some more frames to make sure that all of the caramel went down to the bottom of the domain object. So everything of the bar itself is covered by caramel. Okay, and then you can press stop. And so here is something that we need to fix. This, when the cylinder is at the other end of the bar, it should stop to emit fluid. Okay, so this is why we choose to make a preview simulation before we're going to bake for longer times with high resolution, because sometimes it's required to fix things here. Okay, so we need to make the emission stop at this time, at this point here. Let's say 170. Okay, so click the cylinder here and then set a keyframe while holding the mouse cursor on this checkbox here, and then go 1 frame further here to 171, disable it and set a new keyframe, and that will tell the simulator to stop emitting here. So we can resume baking from, let's say, frame number 151. What is great, because it's not required to resimulate all of the simulation. And if you need some more steps here, you can open this more bake settings panel and choose to set or generate save states every, let's say, 25 frames, and then you will have steps from 25 frames here. Okay, so great. Resume baking from 151 will be helpful for us, and then we will see if this works. while this happens, we can select the already simulated fluid, and we can choose a surface material. I recommend to use something from our library here. By the way, we are working on some new things here, but it will take a while till we publish it. So this is our caramel, and I really like how it is looking like. So as you can see, it doesn't stop to emit, and this is because we forgot to do something. So let's say stop again. When we are going to continue from an earlier frame, it's also required to enable this update settings on resume checkbox. Okay, I'm sorry I forgot this. So let's do this again. Resume baking from 151. Okay, so yes, emission stopped here. And it was the last drop. And I think at 250, with 250 frames, that will be enough. Okay, so the next thing would be, I'm happy, yes, I think you all are happy. So the next thing would be to resimulate this with some high resolution. We can reset the baking cache, and I would recommend to use something like, let's say 150. And what is also important is to use some subdivisions, because viscosity would also mean that you will see some flickering in the fluid surface, and using subdivisions will help to solve this. So I think something like 2 will help to make this look really good. Save the file, click bake, and then we will see us. This is what I mean. As you can see, when caramel is getting place on the bar, it's also filling the domain. You see it because caramel is on the domain's ground here, and that might be, this is something that is not really beautiful, and I would like to fix it now before we are going on here. So let me stop and reset the cache, and let me place some outflow objects here. So I take a cube again, scale it down like this, go into the top view to make sure we are in the correct area, like this. And in this view, let's bring it down here. So it will not be able to touch the ground of the domain as the fluid. So let's place the outflow somewhere here. Flip fluids, outflow. Okay, so I think that will look much better. Let's bake again. Okay, great, and that is the result. So I think I like it the way it is looking like now. One hint here is, if you have some holes here, don't worry, we are going to cover it with chocolate. But you can also make the cylinder a bit bigger. You can play a little bit with viscosity, and of course with or without, playing with or without outflows here. So there are different ways to make that look much better. So I think to explain how all these things will work, that will be good enough. So I can stop baking now, because we do have, yes, we have all frames we need. And yes, we should think about how, if this is a look we would like to see from caramel, or if it should be somewhere smooth. And of course, yes, it should be. So go to the modifiers tab, select our simulated fluid surface, and we have prepared this thing here. So there's a smooth modifier. You can choose a factor of 1 and try repeat, something like 20, and then it will look like this. And this is something I really like to see for caramel. Okay, so as I told you, don't worry about these holes. It can be solved by making this cylinder bigger, or by playing around with some other viscosity settings. And now we are coming to the tricky part. So let's save this thing here. As I told you, I think yes, let's say 200 frames are enough. So we are going now to export our simulation here into Alembic cache. You should think about if the final mesh you see here is the one you would like to use, or if you would like to use the preview mesh. That is also possible. So you can play around with this. Maybe you like this preview mesh more, so you can export this one, or you are going to export the final one. So you have to decide before clicking on export. I always use the final mesh because it looks more stable and more beautiful. Okay, so select your fluid surface, make sure it is selected, yes, and then I press F3, type in Alembic and click on Export Alembic. Okay, so I'm in the correct folder here. I think the name is okay. It's number 1 caramel ABC, stands for Alembic cache. And I set the frame range from 100 to 200 because I told you this is what we need. And I changed to selected objects only and deselect or unselect renderable objects only. And the other things are okay like they are. We do not need to do anything else here. Okay, we could disable these 2 checkboxes here, but I think it's not really required. Then click on Export Alembic Cache and follow the bar on the top here, on the bottom here, because this will tell you when exporting has been finished. Great, and when that had been exported, we are going to save our scene into a new file. So click on File, Save As, and now let's change that number to 2 and let's name it chocolate. Okay, then click Save. And what is also really important, don't forget to do this, click on the domain and take a look to the Flip Fluid cache panel here. And this is the cache folder for the caramel, and all the baking files has been saved inside here. So if you would now click on Reset, that will be deleted. But as we are now going to simulate chocolate, we can use another file, another cache folder name. So let's type in 2 and call that chocolate, underline flip fluid and so on. This is because I would like to always keep my original files on my disk and do not delete it, because sometimes it's required to re-export or to change something, and it's good to have them where they are. So this is a name for a new chocolate simulation, and now you see nothing. Yes, that is because we now need to re-import or to import the Alembic cache we exported before. So hit F3 again and type in Alembic, and then click on Import Alembic, select the caramel file, take a look here, everything is okay, it's not required to check the sequence checkbox or anything else, just click on Import Alembic, and then you will see our caramel is back, but it's not an imported simulation from our Flip Fluids add-on, it's now a ABC cache file, Alembic, and that does mean you can also import it without having the Flip Fluids add-on and use it. Okay, so I would say we can bring the material back to it. So while this is selected, choose caramel. Okay, great. And let me save the file again. Okay, so what we do now need to think is when you are going to add some chocolate to it, the chocolate should be behind the caramel. Now the cylinder is in the same place where the cylinder for the caramel was. You can add another object as inflow, or you can offset the animation from the caramel. So the way to do this is click on the modifier, and you will see that mesh sequence import modifier that is used for our Alembic cache file. And now you can use an example override frame. That means you can animate that frame or keyframe that frame field here. This way it's possible to manipulate the speed of the simulation or to start and stop at another frame range. But what I'm going to do is I will not override the frames. I'm going to offset the simulation by negative 25, an example. This way the cylinder is behind its original position, and that is optimal for our chocolate. And we do not need to add in keyframes a new object or add new inflows. It's already there and we can use it. So all we need to do is select the domain and maybe change the viscosity, because chocolate have another viscosity than caramel, for my opinion, but that depends on what you are looking to do. I think something like 3 could look great, and yeah, that should be all. So let's click save, and then something will happen that might be some frustrating in the first moment. So let's hit bake. Oh, one thing more. We need to make the caramel an obstacle. Sorry, flip fluids obstacle. And we need to click that export animated mesh checkbox to export all these caramel frames for our flip fluid simulator. Yes. And you can also check that skip re-export checkbox, because one that has been baked or exported is not required to do this again, as long as we're not going to change anything here from the mesh. Another hide is, before we're clicking bake, is we should resize all that things here, because the chocolate needs some place around the caramel. Maybe you have enough place when the domain is big enough, but if it's not big enough, I recommend to select the imported simulation and that bar and scale them both just a little bit smaller. Just a bit, that's enough. So this way the chocolate will have more place around. Okay, so save and then select the domain and hit bake, and now this happens. We get a warning frame, warning box here that tells you that something is not okay with the topology. Yes, and this is because our flip fluid simulator does not like if anything in the mesh is changing. And in this mesh, in this imported animated mesh, the number of vertices are changing. And the way to make this work now is select the domain and scroll down all the way here to flip fluid advanced settings, open it, and there's a checkbox for disable changing topology warnings. Enable this, save the file again, and then hit bake. And then you will see baking works without any errors. And now we will wait till this has been finished. Okay, we are nearly there. Just about 9 minutes more to go, but for showing you how it is looking like, that will be enough. So this is what we have now here. Of course, we need to change this material to something like chocolate. So select it, and you can choose from our library here. Let's take chocolate. Fantastic. And if it is too smooth for you, please keep in your mind that we have a smooth modifier on it. So we can decrease that number. In example, you can also disable or enable it, or add another one to it, whatever you like. So for me, this is good enough. Yes. So when you play the animation, you see the chocolate is covering the caramel animation. What is great. Something you can make better is while the caramel is selected, you could use a higher number for friction, so the chocolate will be some slower on the surface. By the way, you could also do this with the bar when it comes to simulate the caramel. So that could also help to avoid holes in the simulation. And yes, that's all. So if this is what you were looking for, I would say we are finished here. You can export this chocolate again, save the file into another file, import it, and yes, use it as obstacle for another layer of fluid, and endless. You can do it endless. So if this is what you like to see, we are finished now. So you can stop the video now and subscribe my channel. And for the other people that would like to see some more thing like falling chocolate things here, you should keep watching this tutorial. Okay, so let's go on. Okay, when it comes to chocolate sprinkles, there are some tricks that have to be done. So I've tried different things. I've used rigid bodies, I've used particle systems, and finally it's a combination of both, and I'm going to show you how I do it now. Of course, like I told you before, it's a good idea to save this scene into a new file. So let's do it. This time it's number 3, chocolate, and Sprinkles. I believe it's written correctly, isn't it? Sprinkles. All right, and the same thing we should do with the cache, because we do not want to overwrite the already finished chocolate that we have here. So let's type in a 3 here and sprinkles here, and voila, that is good enough. Okay. For this simulation, it's not required to export the chocolate as Alembic cache, because we're going to resimulate it. We just want to make sure we have it in the cache if you would like to render it a later time without sprinkles. And this time we will make a new simulation. Okay, so like I told you before, we are going to make a particle simulation, and we need to model all that single sprinkles. And the way I did this in my test was I viewed a cylinder. Just follow what I'm doing here now. Bring it there, scale it down a bit, scale it in this way. And then I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier on it. Number 3. And let me add some loot caps. I'm pressing Ctrl R on my keyboard to make this. Ctrl R and then click here. Okay. Then let me shade this smooth. Shade smooth. And if you do not like this here, this is not beautiful, a trick to fix this. Well, maybe there are better ways, but this is how I found out that it works, is to delete a face here. Delete face, and of course the same on the other side, face, and then select this edge, this outer edge here. I'm pressing Alt on my keyboard and pressing left click. And then E, S, and then with S I'm scaling it down as small as possible. It's okay if it's not really closed, because it's that small that nobody will see it. All right, then, and then it's fixed. Okay, that's the way I'm doing it. So the same thing here, E, S, and scale it down. And yes, so far that looks great. We could make it look better in this way. This way does not need to be symmetric. So yes, I like the way it is looking like. Let's call this one sprinkle. Sprinkle. This was our inflow. This were our outflows. Domain. Okay, so our sprinkle, we can keep it where it is. The next thing is we need a plane. This will be used to emit particles. Let's go to the top view. Make it big enough so we want the particles to cover our chocolate later. Or maybe we will cover the caramel, and the chocolate will be come over the sprinkles. Yes, that's a good idea. Okay, when we have a plane here, we need to add a particle system. So we will do this now. Here, we do not really need many sprinkles. Just type in something like 150. And the lifetime should be, they should never die, of course. So type in something like 250, an example. The source is faces is okay, because we are emitting from a flat plane, so it's not required to use volume or something else. And let's see how it is looking like now. Yes, what we do not need is velocity, so we can set this to 0. And yeah, I believe that is a good start now. Okay. The next thing is we want to make these particles looking like this new object here. So the way to do this is scroll down here to render, and then take a look to render as and type in object, and then as instance object you can click here and select our new object, and then play the animation, you will see these are our objects here. We need to scale them some bigger to look like they should look like. Yes. And of course we need some rotations, because this way it will not look really great or realistic. So let's open the physics. Now where's rotation? Here's rotation. Check the rotation checkbox here. And of course you can randomize this. I don't know if dynamic is... Oh, let's check this. Take a look how it is looking like. And yes, that's great. Okay, so the next thing would be to, yes, we need some collision. And of course, the collision should not be that bar here, because then all that particles will be covered by the caramel and there will no effect, so that will not take effect into the simulation. So what we would need is the caramel as a collider for the particles. And that is not possible, because this is an imported Alembic animation, and this cannot be used as a collision object for what we are going to do now. But a trick is, you can jump into the last frame, and then while the caramel is selected, press Shift D to make it duplicate and click, and then this is the original, the duplicate. Let's call this caramel collider. Okay, and let's disable the original object here for now. It was this one, I'm sorry. Let's call this Alembic, just to find it better later. Caramel Alembic, and we can make that invisible now, and this is our collider, our duplicate. And then we can take a look to our modifier panel here and click on apply. This way we have a static mesh now, and this can be used as collision object. We could delete the material to not be confused, and we can switch this to another viewport visibility. So I would say it's good enough to have it as wire. So it's not beautiful, but for what we are going to do, it is fine enough. Okay, so now go to the physics panel here, and it's not required to be a flip float obstacle, because the original animated caramel will be our animated obstacle, so delete this one. And now let's enable collision. This collision field is only for particles, and when we play the animation, it's some slower, of course, and you will see the particles are falling down and they are jumping away. It's not really beautiful. What we can do is we can take this collider here and say we have stiffness from, I believe, 10 at the maximum, friction set to 1. Yes, and then take a look how it is looking like. Yes, it's not really beautiful. We should give a material to this here. So while this is selected, go to materials, and it takes chocolate. And now let's make that chocolate some darker, but first make a duplicate of it and then rename it to chocolate dark and make it some darker. Otherwise we would not have a contrast to our new chocolate that we are going to make later. And of course we could use some more roughness. So I would say something like 0.2, 0.3, something between. Yes, I think that is okay. Something like, so this way we can see them better on the white collider here. Yes. Okay, so this is a way it will not work and it will not look very great. And what I also found out is that particles will never keep on this flat. They will move all the time. I don't know why. I didn't find any solution for this. But what I did find out is that we can make these things real and then use them as rigid body. But before doing this, we should prepare this single object here. Okay, so the material is okay. Subdivisions is okay. Let's go to the physics panel and make sure this one will be a rigid body. It will be an active one. Shaped convex hull is absolutely okay. And when it comes to dynamics, we should use something like 0.5, and we should enable this deactivation checkbox. So this will not end up with a perfect simulation, but it will be good enough, and with some tricks we can make it nearly perfect. Something I'm going to show you later. Okay. Yes, so this is prepared to be a rigid body object. And the other thing is, of course, we need to make this an obstacle. Flip fluid and an obstacle. And it's not required to check this export animated mesh checkbox, because when we do this and we have 150 single objects here, it will take way too long to export and simulate the things. But it's not required, so you can leave all these things as they are. Just make sure we have a rigid body and a flip fluid obstacle object. Okay, so far so good. Now let's take a look to our particle simulation here. What we can do now is we can tell the particle system that all particles should be generated once. So type an end frame of 1 here and you will see all particles here. And yes, all these particles are duplicates and we just need to make them real by converting them. But before I'm doing this, I will take this plane and this object and I'll add this to a new collection. So let's make a new collection and call this sprinkle. And then this and this, move this inside this new collection. Okay, great. Time to save. And I would also say, let's save this into a new file just to have a backup. So let's call the sprinkles be an example. Okay, so and now we can go to our modifier tab and click on convert. So what now happened is all objects are now real objects. So this means we can delete the plane here. And all objects are rigid bodies and all objects are flip fluid objects. So if we need to make changes here, it took a time to find out how this can work, but it's really simple. So let's say you would like to change the settings of all these single objects here. Something like, I don't know, something like you would like to change the damping translation here. Then what you can do is select all objects here. This way. Oh, let me remove this lamp by side. Okay, so let's select all these objects here. Make sure while holding shift that one is selected or that one is an active one. And then you can make some changes here, like an example. One, and then right click this field here and click on copy to selected, and then you will see all objects have this new value. Really great that that is possible, because in my tries I had many errors, I had to fix much things, and I was really happy that I found out that this can work that easy. Okay, good. So let's make this back to 0.5, right click, copy to selected, and just check if this worked everywhere, and yes, it did. So what we also need to do is to make this a collision object for rigid bodies and not for particles. So we have to remove this collision here and we make this a rigid body object. It's a passive one, and what is really important, because we have these waves here, to select as shape mesh. And I believe final is important. Yes, that should be enough. And on surface response, we should use the highest possible friction and save the file and press space to take a look how that will look like. Yes, this is how it is looking like. So this is what I told you before. They will jump here and jump there. They will never lie and do nothing. But it's not a problem because I found another trick to make it great. But we have to find a solution for the way these things are falling down. What I did here is I make something that helped us to animate this. So very simple. I took a cube, scaled it big enough so that all of these chocolate sprinkles have a place there. Yeah. In edit mode, I add an edge into the middle. Then I took the sides, this edge and this edge, and move them along the z-axis a little bit. Yes. And when looking from the side, I rotated it a bit. Oh, not by being in edit mode, by being in object mode. That should be done. Yes, okay. And we have to make this and rigid body too. It's passive. It will be animated later, so check this. We also have to choose mesh here because otherwise, let's take a look to what happens otherwise. This will fly in the air, so change this to mesh, and then that will work exactly like what we are looking for. So, great. We can decrease the friction of this object to something like 0.2 in example. Yes, and I believe you might know what I'm going to do here. So, let's try another value here. Of course, this is many things are trial and error here, so it's maybe a long way to find the right settings. Yeah, we can also take this point here and move it a little bit upwards. So make the sprinkles not come only at this point down. Yes, but I think it's randomized enough. Okay, great. Good one. Good one. So object mode, just a bit more of this. And we can take them all, rotate them also. Yes, so like this. And all what we have to do now is to find a better position for all these things. So select them both and move it a bit more in this direction. And let's have a look. Please take notice about this cylinder because this is going to simulate our new chocolate later. So we have to think about the timing we have here, we need here. This should be okay. So let's take this one, press I to set a location keyframe, and yes, let's see how long this cylinder will take for the other side. I would say at this point, just our new object will be moved along this axis till, let's say here. Set a new keyframe and let's check if this will work. Of course, if you would like to have some more random motion, you can use keyframe or graphic modifiers to add some shakes here, or use keyframes to rotate or whatever. But to explain how it works, this is okay. So let's save this thing. And what we now need to do is we need to bake this. So let's go into this field here, rigid bodies, open this, open the cache. From when frame 1 to 250 should be enough. So click bake and wait until baking has been finished. Okay, and when ready, just check if this is looking great. Yes, for me it's good enough. So let's save again. And what we now need to do is we would like to convert all these animated objects to keyframed objects. So this is a baked simulation, but we want to have this as a keyframe animation. So deselect everything and make sure you are selecting only the things here. Always check if you selected all. Okay, and then we need to press F3. Back to keyframes is what we are looking for. From frame 1 to frame 250, and then press OK. And then just wait. It seems Blender has been frozen now, but it's doing something, so just be patient and wait till it has been finished. Okay, and when this has been finished, we can delete this object. Delete it, and now we have a keyframes animation, and that also means that playback is a bit faster than using a baked simulation. Okay, so far so good. So what's also great about using keyframe object is this. So when all these has been selected, we are able to to manipulate the start and the end frame. So let me make this smaller here. And as you can see, let's move here. We can move all these keyframe points here. And this way we have full control about when these things start to fall and when they stop. So if we find out that this is not a good timing for us, we could move this a bit in a direction that is matching our idea about timing. So should they fall before the chocolate is coming down from the inflow or after this? So I think it is okay. So you could also scale this to have to affect the speed, but I do not recommend to do this. And what is also a good thing is, if you would like, we can do something like connect these things to a parent, and then we can offset the z-axis. So let's do this. While all these are selected, press Shift Z and select cursor to selected, and then add a new, let's use an empty, move it a bit more high here like this. Select all these things here and make sure the empty is the one you have selected lastly and is active, and then press Ctrl P and set parent to object. And one more time, this will take a little bit because there is many data, so just be patient till Blender has been finished with this. Okay, so it's not required to do this, but it is a bit more comfortable to do something like this. So let's see. All the things are here, and we can now move the empty along the z-axis to fix the high here, if you want. So that depends on what you're going to do. Maybe that depends also on how thick your emitted fluid is, because when it's too thick, you maybe are not seeing any of these sprinkles below. And so you should think about this before going to bake a simulation. Okay, so I think I like this because there's also some caramel and the chocolate on top of this, so I think that will be a good place. And yeah, so we are nearly there. What we now need to do is we can smooth the motion of all the sprinkles here, because as I told you, these things sometimes do not stop to move, and some of them might be kind of shaky. So the way to fix this is, one more time, make sure all these are selected. Okay, and then switch to the graph editor here. And while all are selected, search for smooth and click on smooth keys. And one time is enough to fix shakiness. So this will be much more beautiful than before. Okay, so, and what we could also do is, let's switch back to the dope sheet here. What we can also do is think about when everything should stop. So for me this looks great at this point, but if you would like to stop falling sprinkles here, or in general, if we want to stop everything to move, we can delete all keyframes behind this frame here. So deselect them all and just select the last ones here and delete them all. And now nothing will move here. So this is the trick. Okay, another thing now is we have to think about if the resolution of our fluid simulation is high enough to make the simulator see all these little objects here. And one way to check this is to go select the domain, and then go to the physics panel here, scroll all the way down here. Well, let me close this panel here. I'm sorry. Let me close this board settings. Then scroll down to Flip Fluid Debug here. Open this one and enable Display Grid. And this is a representation of the simulation grid. You have to switch to Final Mesh Grid to see how fine it is. And then you have to think about if this is fine enough to make the simulator take notice of the small objects. I believe it's not, so I'm going to increase the resolution to 250. Yes, that could work. And then I can disable this grid here. And all we have to do now is to click Save. And of course, let's bake the things. And as told you, we have now many objects here, so the exporter will take a longer time to export all this data here and start to bake. So let's wait till baking has been finished and see if this is a result we like. Okay, maybe this is not the most beautiful or the sexiest chocolate bar you have ever seen. But nevertheless, I hope you like this tutorial and you find it useful for your needs. So I'm not going to explain the step where we are adding the white lines on top of the surface, because it's the same way like I've shown you before. You have to export the chocolate as Alembic and then import it in a new file, and then you can delete the outflow, and you can, I believe you can simulate as many fluids as you like, top on top, each by each, using this way. Okay, so finally I would like to give you some tips for rendering. So tip number one is, as this chocolate is very glossy, when it gets colder, it's a good idea to make it, to give it some more roughness here. Yes, like this, because it's finished, it's cold, and yes, it's not fresh coming out from a chocolate producing machine. So this is one thing. Another thing is the surface. So if this is not smooth enough, remember that there is a smooth modifier you can use to make it some more smooth. Or you don't use it. So this depends on what you like. This is another thing. If you're going to render, let's say we have a camera here, like this. I also do recommend to use depth of field. So the way I'm doing it is I add an object, something like an empty. And this will be the point where my camera should focus to. So while the camera is selected, I go to the camera settings. I enable depth of field. I choose my new empty. Let's call this one depth of field. Then I can choose depth of field here for depth of field, and then scroll the f-stop down. I think to something like 0.5, 4, 3, however what you like to see, and then you can move this dot object to to affect the point that is sharp, or the the environment that becomes blurred out. Okay, so this looks more beautiful for rendering. And when using glossy materials, I also recommend to use an environment map, some HDRI images. So I'm using the Gaffer add-on to do this. So when I'm enabling this, I'll be able to choose from different HDRIs. background images, and of course we need to switch to the rendered view to make them visible. So it might take a while, just to have an example, because this gives your scene some more realism. I think it's blurred out a bit too much. So yeah, that looks fantastic. Yes, and yes, that's all from my render tapes. So this is a way you can do. You should render this on a transparent background, and then you are able to to add different backgrounds. So try your scene with different backgrounds because your chocolate bar is on a transparent background. The way to do this is in the render settings, you have to choose film transparent. Yeah. Okay. So another thing, there was a question how we can make the viewport more beautiful. Let me show you some tricks here. You can disable this relationship lines here in this drop down. Just disable that checkbox, and you can disable all this text informations here in the same window. Just disable the, where is it? Disable the text info. Yes. Like this. Okay, I think that should be enough. I hope you loved watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe my channel. More will come soon. Goodbye.
All I wanna do is feel awesome. Baby, can you make me feel awesome? Up and down, side to side, and then back and forth. Up all night again, me and you, left and right, and then whoa, whoa. I'm in an Uber to your place again. Had a couple fucks, but I lost them. I'm sleepwalking in the dark again.